In this episode of The Art of Boat Building, I'm going to design and build a retractable kickup rudder. To get started with our retractable rudder, I should first start with some of the brief that I was given by Steve of Acorn to Arabella. So one of the main things that he said about the tiller-rudder combination is that he wanted the rudder to be retractable. So I started looking at a lot of different solutions of retractable or designs of retractable rudders on the internet. And I saw this one, and that one kind of intrigued me. Well, it so happened then, a couple of months ago, that Steve had one of his viewers stop by and donate this tiller to him. Now, the nice thing about it is that it's exactly the right length for Victoria, my little tender here. And the other thing is that it articulated up and down like this, much the way that it did in that video. So I decided that that would be the design that I would go after because A, I had this tiller to work with, and B, I think that's a really elegant design. So the first thing that I needed to figure out was how I was going to attach the tiller to the rudder. So when we look at the end of this tiller that attaches to the rudder, we can see that it has a square hole in there. Now this square hole actually tapers, so here on the top side it's 5/8 of an inch wide, so it's 5/8 by 5/8, and on the bottom side it is 3/4 of an inch by 3/4 of an inch. So this hole here is tapered. So what I think I needed to do was to design a tapered shaft that would go in here, and because it is rounded, is then that I would make that fitting be rounded to match that the head of the tiller here. So I put together a drawing of the way that that might look right here, and got some kind of critical dimensions for it. So you can see this is the top view, and then this is the side view. I also designed a gudgeon and pintle for the rudder also. So the first step was to have my friend Steve model this in some 3D software so that I could then print it in 3D plastic and then cast them in bronze. So here's the 3D rendered part for the tiller bracket. I then printed it in a PLA plastic. This plastic burns out pretty close to the same temperature that wax does. So then I sprued it up with wax and the other gudgeon and pintle parts, and then I got ready to cast them. Here we are pouring the silicon bronze into the ceramic shell mold. Once the metal was cooled, I was breaking off the ceramic shell investment. Here is the pintle and the gudgeon, and this is the block that will receive the tiller. So you can see I've got all of my bronze parts back from the foundry now, and this is the fitting that I was talking about that will go onto the tiller here. So you can see it fits. I've actually cleaned it up a little bit, and I've filed it down so it'll fit in there the right amount. So you can see it goes in like so, which fits quite nicely. And then the nice thing about this taper is that if you just give this a whack, then it will stick in there. And then in order to release it, just need to push the top of it down. You can see that actually put it in there pretty tight. So I've got that pretty well trimmed up. Now some of the other parts that I have here, you can see I've got a couple of gudgeons and a couple of pintles. This one gudgeon I've actually started cleaning up a little bit. So you'll see these rough castings will clean up quite nicely. I cast a mast partner for the mast, and this is a tow hook or a tow eye that will go on the bow of the boat. And then these are 3 cleats that we'll need for the rigging. Well, now that I've got all of the bronze parts completed for the rudder, the next step is to get started working out the geometry of making that flip-up rudder. I've cobbled together a few pieces of scrap plywood in order to figure out the geometry of how this is going to work. So the tiller would be up here like this, and so this would be with the rudder in the down position. And so what would happen is then when it comes up, it goes up and then down. Well, I've got the basic geometry of the rudder figured out. So now what I need to do is to make a full-size drawing of it. So what I've done here is I've made a full-size drawing of the rudder and how the tiller is going to attach here. So I took the my prototype here and made some very specific dimensions on each one and laid it out. So you can see, like if I went here from these two pivot points, which is 8 and 15/16. So then on my drawing from those two pivot points, I have 8 and 15/16 also. So what I need to do now is to figure out how to make some of these brackets in here. So this little connecting arm here that helps make that pivot is I have drawn out here. And what I need to do is to figure out how to make that piece. So what I've come up with is I have some 1/2-inch bronze rod here and some 1/4-inch bronze rod. So I think if I were to cut some little discs off of this and use that here and then drill a hole in there and attach that bronze rod there. Of course, have one on this end also. So what I need to do first is I need to take this rod and get it cut off. So I think the easiest way to do that is to take it over to my friend Steve's house and have him do that on his metal lathe. So that's what I'm going to do next.
Sometimes just get the hacksaw and take it off and then face it. There's some left. No. Yeah, 1.1 or 17.5 thousandths. So. See here.
Perfect. I've got my two little pieces here. So these two will go here and here, and then this 1/2 or 1/4-inch rod will go between them like so. So what I'll need to do, so in order to get these lined up, I'll use the original bracket and then I'll put these on there so that I know that the alignment is just right. So in order to get this attached, what I need to do is to drill a 1/4-inch hole in here, and then I will silver solder the rod in there like so. Okay, I've got that piece all made, which will go just like that. And now the next thing that I need to do is to make these little brackets right here that will hold it to the tiller and to the top of this rudder piece here. So what I'm going to do is to use some sheet bronze like this, and this is 1/8 of an inch thick. So what this will look like is I'm going to make sort of a flat piece like so, and then put these 2 tabs on each side. So I've got something along that line, a couple holes in here and then a hole in there. So then I'll silver solder all this together. So that'll be the next thing, is to get these cut out of the bronze. Now I've got those 2 little brackets done. So one will go here on top of that rudder, and then this one will attach to the tiller, and then our connecting arm will connect the 2 like so. So of course I'll need to drill a couple of holes in here, and I'll need to drill some holes in the tabs here so it can be attached to the tiller and the rudder. So the next thing I need to do is to make the wooden parts for the rudder. Now one piece is here, which there's 2 pieces that'll go on there, which are the cheeks, and those I'm going to make out of oak because they need to be quite strong with these pivots in here, and it being that it'll be attached to the tiller. Now the blade of the rudder I'm going to make out of mahogany. So that's my next step, is to get some of those materials prepared. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this full-size drawing out and use it as a template. After the fiberglass cloth and 2 fill coats of epoxy, I sanded it, and then I applied several coats of epoxy barrier coat primer. What I'm doing here is mixing up some JB Weld epoxy, and I'm going to insert a bronze bearing at the pivot point in the rudder blade. Well, each of the cheeks that I'm going to need for the rudder need to be 7/16 inch in thickness. So what I've got here is I've resawn a couple of slices that are both 1/4 of an inch, because what I've decided is that a piece this size that is a 1/2 inch or 7/16, that it'll have a tendency to want to cup. So what I've got here are these 2/4 inch pieces, and then I've got some 1/8 inch slices here that I can then put out, and I'll glue those on, and then I'll glue this other slice on top of there, essentially making a piece of plywood Now what I'll end up with is 5/8, and then I will plane that down to 7/16 and get the exact thickness that I want. I've got my 2 cheeks that I made this laminated plywood out of, and then I've milled them down so that they are exactly 7/16 of an inch thick. So the next step is to make this template. So what I've got here is, of course, I cut this part of the rudder out to make the main blade. So now what I need to do is to make a template for these cheeks. So what I'm going to do is to take some magic tape and tape it back on there, and then that way I can recut it out. Now that I've got the 2 cheeks cut out, what I need to do is to figure out how to attach them together. So they'll basically go together like this, and then there'll be a space where the blade will go in here. Now, one of the things that I want to be able to do is to be able to take it apart in case this internal mechanism needs to be gotten to. So what I've thought is that with this pivot point up here, like so, that if I were to make 2 pieces of wood that would split and go inside of here. So I've got 2 pieces of wood, and the inside of this is 5/16, 1 5/16. If I split these in 2 so that then this can sit on there, then I can put a bolt screw through here that will hold those in there. So that will hold the top side of it. And then, of course, the pintles will be attached here and here, and so those will hold that part together, and of course the pin will be here in the center. So what I'm thinking is that these pieces of wood would come down where I've got this sort of dashed line here, like so, so that the piece of wood then, after it's been split, would go in here, and then I could cut this off. So what I need to do is to mill these down so that they total that 1 5/16. So I believe each one then needs to be 21/32. So that's what I'm going to do next, is to get these milled down to that size. My pintle castings came out about a 1/16 of an inch narrower than I had thought. In my planning, I decided it was better to mortise out for the pintles than to make the cheeks narrower. After getting the initial placement done with my router jig, I then used a hand chisel to clean up the remaining amount, ultimately taking off about a 32nd of an inch on each side. So I got the cheeks all shaped now, and I've mortised out where the pintles will fit in there. Now, one of the questions is how I will attach these pintles. One of the challenges here is, of course, the blade will be in here and it'll be pivoting. So inside, I need to be very careful about having any kind of a screw come through and or a bolt head in there. Because it's only 7/16 inches wide, that I really can't get a screw that I think would be long enough that would hold anything. So what I've come up with, I can take this apart here, is to use what's called post and screws. And so I've got a couple of them here that I purchased, and these are actually 1/2 inch long ones, because that's the smallest they come. And it comes with, there's threads on the inside of this little post, and then the screw goes in here. Now this is a 3/32 screw, so what I think I'm going to do is perhaps not use the screws that come with it, but to use a 3/32 flathead screw like this. So I think it'll give it more of a classic look as opposed to the screws that come with them like this, which isn't bad, but it certainly, I think this will give it much more of a classic look. So how these are going to work is, what I've done is on the back side of this cheek here, I've mortised in there, or counter sink, or counter bore is the actual proper term. And then I've taken one of these, shortened it so that it's the exact thickness that it needs to be. And then these will just simply go into these holes like that, and I'll epoxy that in, and then that's perfectly flush and smooth. So then on the other side, you can see that it sticks up here, so then this pintle will fit on there just like that, and then I'll be able to put this machine screw in there, and I think that's what's really going to hold it together nicely. So that's my next job, is I'm going to finish cutting up those posts for the rest of the cheek. I've got the two cheeks done and sanded down to 220 grit sandpaper. Now I epoxied these posts in there with some JB Weld, which is a really, really strong epoxy. It also cures quickly. So that's all done. Now to put a finish on it. So what I'm going to use is some potassium dichromate. Now, I may not have pronounced that properly, but I'm sure if I didn't, you'll let me know. It is a chemical. Well, they're crystals, and you dissolve the crystals in some distilled water like this, and it's a method of getting a finish. A lot of furniture restorers use this because what it does, it doesn't stain the wood as much as it puts a patina on the wood, much like an old piece of furniture would get. So a patina is much nicer than stain, and what it does is this potassium dichromate reacts with the tannins in the oak, and then it turns dark. Now, it should turn, it'll slowly turn darker the longer that it's on there. And you just basically put it on. You'll see that at first it will slowly start turning darker. Now I've tested it on some smaller pieces and it mimicked the color. Well, you can see very easily it turning already. But I tried it on some test parts and it got very close to the color of the mahogany that's on the transom. So in addition to doing the cheeks here, you can see I've got the tiller sitting here and I've stripped the old finish off of it and then sanded it really well. So I'm going to also put the same solution on it so that it will also match the cheeks of the rudder. See, it gets a really nice rich color. Now, because you dissolve these in distilled water, what you do when you're done is you just leave the lid off and you let the water evaporate, and then those crystals are good basically forever. The nice thing about this, unlike stain, is you don't have to worry about wiping it off. Just get it on there and let it dry. And because it is water-based, it dries pretty quickly. Well, as fast as water evaporates anyway. I'm going to let these sit for just a little bit, and then I'm going to get the back side. While the varnish is drying, we'll look at how I made these brackets for the control arm to attach the tiller to the blade. So I took one of the little brackets and I tapped a hole on one side that was a 1/4 by 28 inch threaded tap. I then cut the same size threads on the end of the 1/4 inch bronze rod. Once that was done, I then marked the length of it and I cut it off. And once I had it cut off, I then put a slot in the end of it to accept a screwdriver. So you can see I've got all of my little parts here now. And one of the important things about this bracket is on this side it has those threads, and on this side there's a hole just slightly bigger than 1/4 inch. Now how I achieve that is with a letter drill, and this is an F letter drill, which is just slightly bigger than 1/4 inch. It is actually only 7/1000ths bigger than 1/4 inch, so it fits in there, but not snugly at all. So you can see if I take this 1/4 inch rod, it fits in there very nicely. Now I used that same drill bit to drill out these holes so that it would easily slide on this shaft. So how this is going to go together is this will go in here like this, and then my little threaded rod will go in here, and my screwdriver you can see that fits in there very nicely, and it's very smooth on both sides, and then that will articulate. So I will be able to attach that one there, and then I'll be able to attach this one up here on the tiller. So to anchor the pin into the pintle, you can see I've got a 1/4 inch pin here and a 1/4 inch hole. You can see that it won't go in there at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to heat up this part of the pintle, and then once that's hot, I'm going to put that in, drive it in, and then once it cools, it'll freeze around there and hold it in permanently. With all of my parts made, it's now time to get them assembled. All right, we've got it all assembled now, so it's a moment of truth. It's always best to leave the bottom pintle a little longer so that it's easy to get the rudder on there. Well, it works pretty good. I am very happy with that. I can see the bottom of the rudder is equal to the skeg, which is what I was looking for. Well, all in all, I am pretty pleased with the way that it turned out and the way that it functions. There's a few little minor tweaks that I think I'm probably going to make, but they are very, very minor. Well, that's it for this episode. So as always, thanks for watching, and remember, if you're going to make it beautiful.